This morning, my title of my message is, Are You Intentional About People Jesus Said Matter? We're going to talk about why people matter, which people matter this morning. But one day, an antique collector was walking through the city when he noticed a mangy cat lapping milk from a saucer in the doorway of a store, and he did a double take. His expertise told him that that the saucer was extremely old and very valuable. So he walked casually into the store and offered to buy the cat for $2. The store owner replied, "I'm sorry, but the cat isn't for sale." The collector said, "Please, I need a hungry cat all around my house because I want it to catch mice. I'll pay you $20 for that cat." And the owner said, "Sold," and handed over the cat. As the collector headed out the door, he turned and said, "Hey, for that $20, I wonder if you'd allow me to have that old saucer. The cat's used to it, and it'll save me from having to get a new dish." The owner replied, "Sorry, buddy, but that's my lucky saucer. So far this week, I've sold 68 cats." A little bit of fun. I'd have bought the saucer, not the cat. Everybody knows how I feel about cats. That's what Satan comes back into your life like. It's a cat. But today I want to I want you to ask yourself one question. I really want you to think about this, because today we're going to get inside your head, and I want you to really think about this. Today I want you to think or ponder on, who are valuable people to me? Who are valuable people to me? Now, do you view people as Jesus does? You know, the drug addict, the drunk, person that might have some personalities that just don't go along with yours. Somebody that's hurt you. How about someone that you have already tagged as a lost cause, or someone or group you wouldn't even go around because of the way they act? Somebody you don't want to associate with? I'm going to ask you this many times through this service. Do you love people the way Jesus does? Now, just to start this off, I think Crosspointe's very good at loving people right where they are. And this week, I watched guys walk around the fair asking questions, just hanging out with others. But do we love people the way Jesus does? I think we can all learn from this one statement. As we look and talk about a few things this morning, I hope by the end of service, you're at least looking at yourself and how much you value people in your life. Do lost people really matter to you? Do lost people really matter to you? That answer right there, hold on to it. Because do your actions show your answer? You might say, "Well, preach, that's kind of tough. That's kind of harsh." Everything that Jesus did in his life here on earth, everything was intentional. Do lost people really matter? Does your actions, the way you carry yourself, the way you treat people, does it show your answer? That's a toughie this morning. In early June of 1995, the nation held its breath waiting on a discovery discover the fate of a 29-year-old Air Force captain named Scott O'Grady. As Captain O'Grady flew his F-16 over Bosnia on a routine air patrol, the Serbs fired a missile that ripped his plane in half. As the aircraft erupted in flames, O'Grady parachuted to a wooded area below. And for 6 days, he hid in those woods, surviving on only grass and ants to eat. Occasionally, he would send out a signal from his low-powered radio. Back in the States, the government officials weighed the cost of sending in a rescue team to locate the pilot. How many lives should be risked to save one man? How much would it cost in fuel and potential loss of further equipment? The mission certainly would be very dangerous. Yet despite all these considerations, it was concluded that the value of saving one life outweighed any of the potential costs. It was a gutsy decision, but it turned out to be a successful one. O'Grady's signals as a guide to rescue teams flew over his general location. In just over 2 minutes, they had the down pilot aboard the helicopter and headed for safety. Do you love people the way Jesus does? And do your actions show it? Now I could go down the row and I could ask each one of you. I could ask each one of you, do you love people regardless of who they are, regardless of what they do, regardless of what outside sin you can see? Do you love them the way Jesus does? This week, as I watched our people sell food, give food, feed our friends. If you look on my messages on Facebook, I called it feeding our friends. I didn't say carnival workers. Because God's checked my spirit, because I believe that we label them. And I don't want to be accused of labeling somebody. They're okay with you calling them that, but I don't want to label people. I don't like it when they label kids in school, much less adults. Do we love people the way Jesus does? Had a older, seasoned lady and gentleman come to the tent this week. You could tell that they've had a hard life. They were asking when we were going to give out food next, and I was telling them about gleaners. And as soon as I answered their questions, you know when God just puts something in your spirit to ask? You know, it just jumps out at you. I asked them if they had eaten. And she said, no, sir, we haven't. You know what I did next? I told them to come around the back of the tent. Wasn't worried about the money. I was worried about the problem. The problem was they hadn't eaten. Now, we fed quite a few people this week, above and beyond just the workers of the rides. I even had a few people come up and say, preach, we give away that sandwich. We thought you'd be okay with it. If you guys know me, I'm not in it for the money. Be nice to break even at the fair, but even if we don't, every one of you guys, when you put that offering in that plate back in the back, or when you put the offering on that computer, I believe that each one of us are in it to win it this morning. And I know that you guys would have said the same thing. You know, do we love people the way Jesus does? You know, I heard 4 or 5 times this week that we were known because we feed anybody. You know, and I believe that churches have niches. You know what I mean? They have places, they have things that they're good at. You know, we might not have very much, but we're good at loving people. We're good at giving to people even when they don't have anything to receive. But I want to say thank you to each one of you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to give to people that were more or less fortunate. Thank you for allowing me and the rest of the team to go out and do something for a solid week. And not one time did I have to worry about, does the church want to do this? Because even if you wasn't there this week, the people that could be there were. But if you wasn't here, you were there because you give to something that is much bigger than you are. And we're thankful for that. Do we love people the way Jesus does? How do you value the people that are lost? How far will you go? How much will you spend to reach the lost? Bill Hybels tells us about a conversation he had with an old friend who knew to be a churchgoer. He casually asked the man, "Are you looking forward to Easter Sunday?" The friend replied, "Nope, I'm not. As a matter of fact, I never go to church on Easter." Hybels said, "You're kidding. You don't go to church on Easter Sunday? You can get arrested for that." Ignoring Hybels' attempt at humor, the man said with intensity, "I don't go to church on Easter because I can't stand to see those oncers. You know, the annuals, all the people who come around once a year, they get themselves all dressed up to make their grand appearance, and they mess up everything at my church, especially the parking lot. Who do those people think they're fooling? They're not fooling me. They're certainly not fooling God. This has bothered me so much over the years that I just quit going to church on Easter. I have no use for oncers." This man obviously had no use for those kind of people, and no doubt was convinced that God doesn't have any use for him either. You know, that may not be our thought process as a whole here today. But sometimes we can get so caught up in what we're doing that we forget who we're doing it for. You know, when we started the church and we moved into the brown building, 6 months after we started the church, we started what we called Fuel. It was for the young kids that was walking around at that time. They were walking around the streets of Connersville. When we started that, we had the cops called on us. We had drunken fights that were trying to beat up some of the kids that come in the room. We had busted holes in the drywall. They even knocked out the main glass door walking out of the church one day. But not one time did we give up on those kids. Now, some of those kids are in college now. Some of them are on the right track. God never said it was going to be easy to serve him. He never said that it was going to be easy to love people right where they are. But I wouldn't take anything for last week. Man, it's probably the hardest week in Connersville. It's the hardest week at Crosspointe. It's hot. You get tired. Sometimes you may feel like you're the only one there working. Anybody with me? Or am I the only one? Sometimes you get a little hangry, not because you got food, it's because maybe you're down one or two people and would love for somebody to come help. You have those gamut of thoughts, but it's real easy to get back on target because, one, we're not doing it for a pat on the back, and two, Jesus will keep humility right where you're standing. We all have a tendency to make assessments of who God has use for and who he doesn't. Now, my personality is, it's real easy for you to go find all the negatives in somebody's life, right? It's real easy for you to look out at them and say, you know what, if they had changed this, this, and this, their life would be 10 times better. My personality is to find the good in them. I don't care what they do, where they've been, what you did yesterday. It's easier for me to find the positive in you than the negative. Because you can work on those positive areas and drop off those negative areas as you walk towards the cross. And if we're not careful, we have reduced the mental list of those God really cares about to our own little group of select people. Now, a lot of times you get cliques in places, you know what I mean? Those same few that you see day in and day out, the ones that maybe are a little bit more like your personality. But I have to pat you guys on the back because I don't see that around here. If you guys know me, if I'm going somewhere, you're invited too. Unless it's just me and my wife. Then respectfully stay away. I'll love you from afar. That's not far, it's far. But our list almost never includes the people out there who are different from us. Do you have somebody that's really hard to understand or get to know? Do you have anybody that rubs you the wrong way, goes against your grain, like running your fingernails down a chalkboard? You know what I mean? I mean, how many of you can hear the sound of claws going down the chalkboard? There's people in our lives that way. Can you see how dangerous this kind of thinking is? Once we have bought into this kind of reasoning, it removes any hope of getting motivated to spread God's love and his grace. You see, if we have somebody that gets on our nerves, we automatically put a label on them, right? Oh, I can't work with that person. The Lord knows I love them, but I can't work with them. Anybody ever said that? I mean, I love them, but God doesn't say that we got to be with them, in the same room as them. I mean, they probably even irritate God. Now we're getting somewhere. You've had the ones that you think irritates God. You've had the ones that irritate the horns off a billy goat. That's Oklahoma for pain in the neck. After all, if those people don't matter, if they don't matter that much to God, then why should we get all worked up about trying to reach them, right? I mean, because I've heard many times, and this thought process doesn't really work in my head, but I've heard people say, well, I love them, but I just can't be around them. Anybody like that? I mean, I love them. I hope they make it to heaven, but there's going to be so many people that they can just stay on that side. You know, in my life, I didn't realize what God was going to give me when he gave me my life. And I've had a lot of things going, and I've told you guys many times where my life is, where it's been, and y'all can see where it's going. But one thing I cannot handle is a white elephant in the room. You know, that one person that you can't even look at them eye to eye. I mean, it just grates on your nerves. And the only reason I can't handle that is because it's a decision. It's a decision that you make inside your head. And you allow them to railroad you to staying away. Because, you know, y'all all know the story about my 3 little ones that I helped raise. Y'all found out that they never was mine, and you found out that my uncle fathered them the 7 years that me and my first wife was married. And how that works, I don't know. You'll have to figure it out. There's probably some scientific situation. But I don't want to know it. And I'm okay with that because God's allowed me to give that up. Right? He's allowed me to love 2 people that never thought about me when they was doing what they were doing. And I say that because the oldest boy yesterday had a little baby, him and his wife. And I really didn't let it get on me, but as I was getting done with my shower yesterday, because we just got off the river, you know how stinky you are when you get off the river. By the way, I found a new passion of mine. I enjoyed it yesterday. My cell phone was in a dry bag. It didn't matter if the President of the United States wanted me. I wasn't taking my phone out of that dry bag. So if you called me or text me yesterday and you didn't hear nothing until like 7 or 8 o'clock, it's okay because we was on the river. But after we got off and we got home and I was taking a shower and we were fixing to go eat, I seen that on Facebook, that little baby. And for a split second, I could feel that stuff well up inside of me. Because that would be my grandkid if all that other hadn't happened. Make sense to you? And my wife, her first response was, it's not. Because her thought process is if she doesn't buy in or look at it very long, it keeps me from going in. And I didn't really get upset or feel, I don't know, it's kind of numb. But I can walk in their house if I had to, hug both their necks, and there's not that fuzzy stuff jumping up. You know, I could go out with my uncle and I could buy his dinner. We could sit and talk about pleasantries, and there's nothing there. But not very many people allow God's power to help them through that. That's why I can say I hate elephants in the room. You know, I really think if you'd let God, just let him go. You know, some of you's got God on a leash. And you're holding him back and I got that, God. You just stay here right beside me. Kind of like when Hadley's walking around and they got her on the thing so she don't run off. Wait a minute, come back here and stand right here. Don't try to fix that over there because I got it. You know, you will always be tormented by the things that you won't let God jump into. Because when God jumps into something, he kind of makes it explode. But many of us in our lives, we want to hold on to them things. When if we would let them go, our lives would be a lot easier. There'd be no stress. There'd really be nothing. You know, I'm no better than they are, and they're no better than me. There was mistakes made, and I let God fix my heart, and I don't have to go there anymore. And I think some could probably be better if you'd let God take care of those things in your life that eat you from the inside out. And the cool thing is I never asked for any of that. You know, I never got before God and said, Lord, if you don't handle this, I'm going to lose it. He started dealing with me back in probably 95 or 6. Maybe not, maybe 8 or 9. God allowed me to teach a class one time at Calvary. And it was named Dealing with Your Past. We had 8 or 10 people, and Tracy and I were excited. It was our first small group to teach there. There was a book study. And it was all about dealing with your past. And I sat there in the room, and this was before I knew anything about whose kids they were or whatever. But I would listen. I listened to a single mom sit there and talk about how a divorce had ruined her life. And she had such a death grip on that one thing and would not let it go that it was destroying every relationship that she was in. You see, when I got married to Tracy, I was scared to death. Not because she wasn't pretty enough or didn't love me enough, but God had to rebuild something in my life. You know, I'd already struggled with being loved enough because how does your uncle father 3 kids in your marriage while you're married? I mean, that's probably a 99% that don't happen or couldn't happen, right? I had a bad problem feeling like I was loved. I didn't understand love. But Jesus is the one that repaired that. He repaired my heart. And if I hadn't allowed him, I might not be where I am today. You know, in Luke chapter 19, verse 10, it says, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who are lost." You know, for me, one of the best places to begin to have a concern for the lost is to see the concern that God has for the lost. You see that song that Kyle just played? He could play that 10 times and I could read a scripture in the Bible and we could leave and I'd feel like I've been at church. Because there's so many people need to learn and understand who God is. One of the central thrusts of Jesus' ministry was to address the issues and get his followers to have the right attitude towards the lost. You see, sometimes we expect them to already have arrived because we are. You know, no matter what we do, we have to give them a chance because at one point, I was there. You know, I went to church once while I was still alcoholic. I walked in and sat down in the church and the people didn't tell me I had to leave. And then I went a second Sunday, same thing. Did all I wanted to do on Friday or Saturday night, and everything I wanted to do after we got home from church. But they didn't expect me to change overnight. You know, in Luke 15, I want you to listen to a couple stories I want to talk to you with. And it was in a teaching occasion in Jesus' ministry. And one day Jesus found himself surrounded by a large crowd of irreligious people. These certainly were a group of oncers, undesirables. You know, the unconvinced, the confused. They were morally bankrupt. They were the people in the town that didn't have it together. Certainly God wouldn't have any use for people like this, right? Off to the side was a huddled group of religious leaders who were shaking their heads, talking to each other in muffled tones. You know, if you were there, it's the ones that somebody would sit on and go, "Can you imagine what she has on?" I mean, look at what he looks like. Ladies might have been, "Do you see those shoes? She doesn't have her toes covered up. And her shirt's too far down." I mean, she ought to know. I mean, they were over there just talking about the people that Jesus was associating with. And if you guys listened a couple weeks back when we talked about Samaria, Jesus went through Samaria even though he was born and raised by Jews. And they knew what was unclean. Jesus didn't care. Because the Jesus I serve meets you right where you are, right? So off to the side, they were talking, you know, making jokes or whatever. They were complaining about the fact that Jesus, who claimed to be the Son of God, and he was holy, was hanging out with those kind of people. Now, Jesus, of course, knew exactly what they were thinking. Don't you think that'd be kind of neat? Walk up to Jesus. "Oh, it's good to see you." Really? You just said you couldn't stand me in your mind. You know, "Jesus, you know my heart." "Yeah, I do. You need to change it." Jesus began. "There once was a man who owned 100 sheep. I want you to think about this story. While he was tending his sheep, you know, one of them little woolly critters, they wandered away. So the shepherd left the 99 behind and went out and searched for that one sheep that was lost. And he kept searching until he found it. When he found it, I can remember just thinking about him taking his staff. And you know that big hook on the staff. And wherever that little sheep was, he could have reached down and grabbed it by the neck with that staff and pulled it out of the thorns and thistles. I can imagine as Jesus stood there and he picked each cucklebur off the baby sheep. And as he talked to it, he'd say, "You're going to be okay because I got you." He tenderly picked that sheep up, put it on his shoulders, and carried it back to the flock. Then he called some of his shepherd's friends. I don't know if they texted or called. I don't know. He's like, hey, party's at my place. I just found the one that was gone. So I got my 100 back. I found that lost sheep. I can imagine it while Jesus was telling those stories. I know if I would have been there, I'd have been leaned in. I could not help but just want to hear every word that come out of his mouth. So Jesus paused. And it says that everyone was still listening. So he continued. Jesus is so good at telling stories. He said, then guys, there was this lady. She had 10 coins. And she lost one of them. And you know how ladies are when they lose a coin, they lose their mind. And she just had to have that one coin. I told her she had plenty of them, but she had to have that one coin back, right? She fired up this lamp. I know it's a waste of oil, but she just had to have that one penny. It was just driving her crazy. And swept the whole house. I know they stay up late sweeping the house, don't they? Well, there's dirt outside, dirt. No, I mean, they had to sweep the dirt, you know, because when you walk on it, it loosens up the top layer and you got to sweep it out. So after she got that done, she swept it all and turned over all the furniture. Man, that one couch, it was heavy. And searched relentlessly until she found it. And when she did, she was so happy, she called some of her friends and asked them to celebrate with her. You can't imagine, I found the penny. Jesus stopped again. He's letting these things, these parables sink in as he's telling them. As Jesus looked around the room, was the crowd really getting what he was saying? He continued. You're going to like this story here. You can just imagine. You're going to like this one because it's really it packs a good punch. There was this man who had 2 boys. Yeah, 2 boys. They be all, you can't even keep them. These 2 boys, they were young, and one of them got a little cocky one day, and he had this little twinkle in his eye. He's had it since he's little. You know, as he's grown up, he's kind of been a handful for Dad. But he wanted a taste of life on the wild side. Ladies, you know what I mean. Because everybody that's married in here, even if you don't want to admit it, ladies, you married who you're married to because you wanted just a little bit of a wild boy. You know, that's what you wanted, just a little bit. So he talked to his father. He's like, Dad, I got to have my money. I can imagine what it felt to him as he sat and watched his son basically say, I want the money, I don't want you. You know that's got to hurt. He headed out into a different land with his pockets full of cash. Dad, I know you want me to have that rent house down there and that herd of sheep. And yeah, I know there's a couple cows, but that right there don't do me no good. I'll just sell them to you. You pay me what that's worth. I can just imagine the hurt that dad was going through. So he found the fast lane, and then he found a fast crowd, and then he got to fast, loose living. You know what I mean? He was at all the parties. Yep. I mean, in today's world, he went down to Miami, Florida, got into all those ritzy guys, and they was having a little Coke and drinking a little wine and beer and whatever they were doing. I mean, he was just letting it all hang out. But he soon found out. that the kind of friends he had found, they didn't stick around. When the money runs out, you know, those friends that, hey, I'll go, it's great. You know, I had friends that would stop by my house when I had that refrigerator out in the garage full of alcohol. They were all about 5:30. They didn't care what kind was in there. I could have bought the cheap stuff, Pabst Blue Ribbon, and they'd have drank it. They'd even drank Hootie Pool. That's some bad stuff. His friends were gone. And one day while he's feeding the pigs, you know, God speaks to you when you get quiet, doesn't he? Even when you're in the wrong place, even when you've done the wrong thing, when you made a bad decision, Jesus is always there saying, hey, if you'll just turn around and walk the other way, I'll be right there with you. No questions asked. I'm here. I want you to make the right choice. One day he was feeding his pigs to try to support himself because he'd thrown all his money away. Disoriented, bankrupt. And I can imagine he finally saw the light. So he decided he would go home. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can imagine that dad. I can imagine that dad looking down the driveway every night while he had his cup of coffee and sipping on that coffee and just enjoying the scenery. I can imagine him just thinking about, man, wouldn't it be nice if that boy just started down the driveway today? You know, I'm to a point now that I wouldn't even say nothing to him. I wouldn't be mad. I would just be excited. I can imagine when he went down and opened up his mailbox. No, not one of them metal ones that creak. You know, they didn't have metal back then. They just a wooden mailbox. I can imagine every time he went down that driveway and come back that he always was wondering, is this the day? Because believe it or not, our Father in heaven and our Father on this earth knows you. He figured when he decided to go home that he would apologize to his dad for the naive and immaturity that he had done, and he'd offer his father to be a hired hand since he knew he had forfeited his right to even be called his son because he had made so many decisions that were wrong. That the only way that he thought he could get back in that house was to offer to feed the pigs. You've been there. You've walked away from God. You've done things that you never thought that Jesus would forgive you of. Maybe you're sitting here today. Maybe you're on Facebook. You made all them decisions, and you just don't think you'll ever be able to do it again. So he packed what little he had, throwed it over his shoulder, and he started off for home. And his father, who had spent hours each day watching and longing for his son's return, can you imagine when he saw that little bubble start up over that hill? That bubble turned into a face, then a neck, then he saw his arms. And I can imagine how excited that dad got. Because no matter what you do as a youngster, no matter what decisions you make as a high schooler or going to college or newly married, your mom and dad will always be happy when you return home. They may be harsh to you. Even the people that think they can write off people. And believe me, I used to. You can't write them off forever. He saw him at a long ways off. And immediately the hope-filled father ran down the road and embraced his son. The boy started to say, I made an awful mistake, Dad, and I don't deserve to be your son. And the Dad interrupted. You see, this is the way God heals your heart if you allow him to. But the dad interrupted. Shh, quiet, boy, or I'll beat you to death. Listen to me. That's what I got when I read it. All of us read a little different. My reading's got enthusiasm. If you don't shut your mouth and let me talk, there's going to be a problem. He interrupted and said, don't talk like that. I'm just glad you're finally home. And can you imagine the boy? Kind of like a dog that's been beat up. He's like, who are you? See, the dad, and I love listening to Jesus' tone and the way he wrote it. But in that story, that dad had already come to that forgiveness. That dad had already come and thought about it being okay. It's just like today. You know, that money meant nothing to that dad. He interrupted and said, I'm glad you're home. He rejoiced, and he ordered a huge party. He said, invite everyone, kill the fatted calf, and bring out a fresh suit of clothes. My wayward son has come home. And man, did they have a party. You know, I could go on and we could talk about the son that never done anything wrong. We could talk about the way he felt. You know, Dad, am I chopped liver? I never done any of that. You know, you're praising him and he went and lost half your fortune. As I close today, I want you to close your eyes. I got that same question. Do you love people the way Jesus does? Can you imagine the power of these stories must had on the people that day? But here's something amazing. This is the only recorded time that Jesus ever told 3 parables in a row. Surely everybody got the point that day. But how about us this morning? Have we really got it? What should these stories be saying to us? Guys, it's saying that God values everybody. He cares about each person. For this is how God loved the world. He gave his only begotten Son so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. In Luke chapter 15, verse 10, it says, in the same way, there is a joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. This morning, as ever heads bowed and ever eyes closed, nobody's looking around. Maybe you're sitting here today. Maybe you've been the prodigal son with Jesus and you've found your way back. And here you sit. Just you and Jesus right where you're sitting. This morning I want to ask you, are you ready to rededicate your life? Or maybe to ask Jesus into your heart this morning? I'm not going to come get you. I want to pray with you. If you're ready to accept Christ this morning and you've never accepted him, just by raise of hands, I want to pray with you. Anybody at all? Maybe today's the first time there's one. that it's ever impacted you, Jesus wants to be your friend. He wants to have a relationship with you. Would there be anybody else? Thank you. There's another one. Anyone else? There's another. As we pray this morning, maybe you just were a little bit intimidated. You know, the angels in heaven right now are having a party because 3 people are ready to accept Christ. God's been doing the work in your life. We're just going to get to see the harvest. Maybe you're here today and you've backslid and been living a certain way and you're ready to come back home. You know, we want to pray with that too. Anybody say you're ready to give in and let God have your life? You're tired of running? Anybody at all? Dear Heavenly Father, as we come to you today, God, as being a part of something like this, getting to see 3 people today that is ready to accept you, God, chances are right now they've already done it. Lord, I just ask right now that you would touch them today. And as we pray, I encourage you to, you speak to the Lord how you want to. You make this your own. But Lord, I pray that you would come into my heart today. I pray that you would forgive me of my sins. I believe that you died, you were buried, and on the 3rd day you rose again. I thank you for coming into my heart and life and giving me that free gift of salvation. We ask these things in your name. If you prayed that prayer this morning, we believe here at Crosspointe you've accepted Christ. And if you've accepted Christ in the last year or 2 years and you hadn't come up to Mark and Juanita for believers' baptism, that's your next step. But this morning as Kyle sings, maybe there's something on your heart that you need to get right with the Lord this morning. Maybe you need to lay something at the altar today. We encourage you to come.
A lot of us grew up believing at any moment we could lose it all. And at the drop of a hat, God might turn his back and move on. A lot of us feel like we blew it, thinking that we're just too far gone. But I want you to know there's still hope for you now. No matter what you've done, you can't erase his love. Nothing can change it. You're not separated, no matter what. There's never been a better time to get honest. Never been a better time to get clean. So come as you are, run to the cross and be free. Oh, be free. No matter what you've done, you can't erase his love. Nothing can change it. You're not separated, no matter where. He's always holding on. You're still a daughter, you're still a son, no matter what. Oh, don't know what you've been taught, don't know what you've been told. separated. No matter where you run, he's always holding on. You're still a daughter, you're still a son, no matter what. Oh, no matter what, you're still a daughter, you're still a son, no matter what. There's never been a better time to get honest. There's never been a better time to get clean. So come as you are, run to the cross and be free. Oh, be free. 'Cause no matter what you've done, you can't erase his love. Nothing can change it. You're not separated. And no matter where you run, he's always holding on. You're still a daughter, you're still a son, no matter what. Oh, no matter what, you're still a daughter, you're still a son, no matter what.
Dear Heavenly Father, as we come to you today, God, I just thank you for touching our lives, Lord. God, I thank you for every parable that's in Scripture. God, I just thank you what you've done in my life and the ones that are right here. God, the ones that are on Facebook today. God, we just ask that you be with us today. God, and direct everything we do. And God, we ask these things in your name. Amen. Got a couple things to go over again. Don't forget about Gleaners. It's going to be on Wednesday.